Welcome to another edition of the Radio Coffee House Show, where Jesus meets coffee meets talk radio. And the next one starts right now. How's it going, everybody? Clint Armitage with the Radio Coffee House, back with another road show. We are in San Antonio, Texas, and it is hot, but we're still going to give you this great show. And this is a great show because we're going to be talking about dreams and visions, specifically in the Muslim world. I guess right now, and it has been for a while now, Jesus has been showing himself to Muslims in other countries, obviously in the Middle East, and then also he's been showing himself to Muslims here in America. So I checked out this podcast by Sean McDowell, and he had an author on there by the name of Tom Doyle. And Tom Doyle wrote a book called Dreams and Visions. And so he's an evangelist. He goes out to the Muslim countries and they provide, medical aid and support for these Muslim people and Muslim families that are in need. And then they pass on the gospel. And what he's been hearing is plenty of dreams from these Muslim people. So there's two clips that I really want to focus on in today's show, and then I'm going to give my take on these things. So the first audio clip is Tom talking about how Jesus is showing himself to the Muslim world in those Muslim nations in the Middle East. And then he talks about a story with a Muslim that had a dream about Jesus specifically, and he goes into that. After that, he's going to talk about how it's happening here in the U.S., and I have my take on that, and I have some verses that I want to go over as well. So this will be a great show, so stay tuned, check it out. Let's do it.
In the beginning, we would hear kind of a standard dream where a Muslim said, I looked across this lake and there was a man in a white robe. And he said, come follow me. And I saw myself walking on water toward him. We used to hear that all the time. Now we hear all kinds of different dreams where something in their life that happens. Jesus is there with their family. Jesus is answering their prayers. Jesus is saying, I'm going to be with you always. Follow me. I mean, we interviewed a guy, Sean, that was at Mecca during the Hajj, and he was going around the Kaaba stone. And he says he looked up, saw a man in a white robe on the Kaaba stone pointing at him and said, Muhammad, you're following the wrong way. Leave and come follow me. So this is a guy in Jericho. So I said, Muhammad, what did you do? And he said, I left immediately. He goes, I got my stuff. I went back home. I've never seen a vision. And he said, when I get home, there's this Christian dude moving in the apartment next to me. And I'm helping him carry boxes in. And I said, I had this weird experience. Do you think is that Jesus? Who was it? The guy explained it to him. And since he was right across the hall, they spent time together daily. And finally, he comes to faith in Christ. He was convinced. So we see all kinds. We see him here. I wouldn't say to the degree that we do in the desperate countries like Iran or Syria or some of these places, a village in Egypt, Afghanistan. Wow, it's high, the number of dreams and visions, but we do see it here. In fact, in Dallas, I was leaving our office one day, and it was July, and it was really hot, and I was in my mind complaining about, gosh, it's so hot. We had just moved from Colorado, 7,400 feet, shorts and a sweatshirt in the summer. It's so nice. Here I am in Dallas. It's hot, and I got in the car, and I wasn't in the best mood. I'm going to take off and go get Joanne. We're going to dinner, and then I looked at my little Honda, and it says 6 miles till empty, and I went, are you kidding? Okay, so then I get off the freeway. 3 gas stations. Okay, I'll take this one. It's a Fina. I stick my card in and it says must see cashier. Okay, so I was like, Lord, come on, I'm late. I just was not in the spirit, if I can just say that, being a jerk. So I go in, put my card down, and this woman comes up and she's Muslim. And I just said, wow, you're Muslim. We work a lot in the Muslim world. We love your people. And where are you from? And she goes, well, you go to the Middle East a lot? I said, yeah. And she goes, well, then you have to guess. where I'm from. I
Ah.
said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Egypt." She goes, "Nope, Saudi Arabia." And I
Mm,
said, "Really?" And all of a sudden it started to hit me. I think God set this up, I think it's more than
mm,
my next appointment. And so I said, I wrote a book about your people and I'd like to give it to you. Could I do that? She goes, "Sure." So I gave her dreams and visions, ran to the car, got it, gave it to her. And I said, "God is honoring your people. Muslims are having dreams and visions about Jesus." And she said, "You wrote a book about that?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." And she goes, "Wow, that's so weird because I've been having dreams about Jesus."
whoa.
And I wanted to stop and turn around and say, "Forgive me, God. I'm tracking with you now." I know why I'm here. I gave it to her. I'm filling out the little thing, a little slip, and I leave. And 2 or 3 days later, I need gas, and I'm in the same area. I thought, I'm going to go to the Phoenix station. And I thought, I'm going to go to that same pump. And I stuck my card in, worked perfectly.
Mm,
And see, I don't think it was a card malfunction. I think it was an order from God. It didn't
mm,
say, "Please see cashier." It said, "Must see cashier." So I walk in, Sean, and she's halfway through the book.
mm.
And I said, "Rawia, you like this book?" She goes, "This book is like my life." I
Oh
said,
my
"What do you
goodness.
mean?" And she goes, "Jesus has been coming to me for over 30 years. I said, "In dreams and visions for over 30? Yeah." "Didn't you ever talk to a Christian?" "Oh, yeah, plenty of them. But I don't know. A lot of them seemed like they were afraid of me because I'm Muslim. And I don't know. I just never got answers. But I knew this. In these dreams," she said two things that just hit my heart. "I never felt so safe with a man in my life as I did with Jesus."
Hmm.
And then he used to tell me, "Remember, Rawia, I love you." And she said, he says, "He died for me." I don't know what that means. And so, "Remember, Rawia, I love you." And she said, "I just figured this. If Jesus loved me this much to come to me for over 30 years, one of these days he was coming for me." And
Hmm.
I said, "Rawia, I think it's today. I mean, I think this is what it's leading up to." And I went through and just shared some gospel verses from Romans and the gospels. And she was ready to receive Jesus. We held hands
Wow.
in the Fina gas station. A Muslim woman
Hmm.
prayed to receive Jesus. Nobody came in and interrupted us. And she loves Jesus today. So it happens here too. I think we should be ready for it.
Okay, so obviously God is doing something. Jesus is showing himself to Muslims in the Middle East, and then he's also showing himself to Muslims here in America. And it's interesting because a couple things with that last story that Tom talked about, how the Lord was leading him to the specific woman that worked at a gas station where he was able to give her the gospel and lead her to Christ, but there were certain steps that had to be taken prior to. And then he finds out that she's already had dreams about Jesus from 30 years ago up until that day, right? So we don't know what God's doing in the background. Like, so I want to talk about this because there's a couple things. First, I haven't really thought about talking to Muslims about Jesus. I guess I just thought that maybe any interaction with Muslims would be more confrontational. And really, I don't know many Muslims and I don't hang out in areas where Muslims are typically. So I don't get to meet a lot of Muslims. And the Lord hasn't really brought me to any Muslims or called me to speak to anybody of the Muslim faith, really. And if he has, I haven't really caught on, or I didn't pay attention or ignored it or whatever in the past. Just like this guy Tom did with his story about the gas station. So now, after listening to this podcast, I actually am opening up my mind to allow the Lord to maybe lead me in this direction, if that's his will, right? But we have to be open to that kind of stuff. And I never saw myself or even, it wasn't even on my radar to speak to any Muslims or anything. But maybe this is just the first step in the Lord leading me to do that. Maybe it's a first step in the Lord leading you to do that as well. And like I said, I kind of thought maybe it'd be confrontational to speak to a Muslim. But really, if the Lord is behind it and then he leads you to it, he's allowing it to happen at the right time, right? So you just have to know that the Lord is speaking to you to tell you that, hey, you need to speak to this person here, and they happen to be of Islam. The other thing I wanted to bring up with that story from Tom was us being ready to listen, to hear God when he speaks, and not get like frustrated from circumstances that he is putting in place. Like he had talked about the credit card not working, right? It's super hot in Texas and he's grouchy and he's not paying attention and he's got stuff to do, going to go out to dinner or whatever. So he's not focused on doing God's work at that time. But he actually runs into a circumstance that it appears that God brought on this circumstance. But if he wasn't paying attention, which he wasn't at first, it's a frustrating thing. Okay, his card is not working at the gas pump, so he has to go inside. He's getting frustrated. And that can happen with us as well, where we get frustrated when these circumstances don't go the way we believe they're going because we're not actually ready for God to speak. So God is using these circumstances to lead him, right? Direct his steps to talk to this Muslim lady that works at the gas station. But he wasn't ready for it. So God was doing certain things to force him into that direction. And then finally, he was tracking to what God was doing. It finally clicked. And that's what happens to me sometimes too. And that probably happens to you as well. Because sometimes I am totally clueless of what's going on. And then finally God does something where the light bulb goes off and I go, oh, okay, it's you, Lord. It's you, Lord, talking to me to do specific things at the specific place at a specific time. And I can't do it at any other time. The opportunity is now. But the Lord has directed my steps to get into this position to be able to tell someone about him, but I wasn't ready. And then finally it clicks. And so that's the other thing I wanted to mention was, hey, we got to be ready. We got to try to be ready. We got to be better at being ready, being prepared, and to give a reason for our faith. And then also lead people to faith if that's the call. Because sometimes we aren't ready, right? Sometimes we're not in the mood, but then the Lord does want us to do that. So the other thing I wanted to bring up, the final thing I wanted to bring up was I wanted to read some Bible verses that goes along with the dreams and visions that these Muslims are having in the Middle East and here in the U.S. And let's see what the Bible has to say about, these times. Okay, so I'm going to be reading from the book of Joel, chapter 2, and I'm going to be starting in verse 28. And this is talking about the day of the Lord. Okay, so here we go. Verse 28. And afterward, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my spirit in those days. I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood, before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. So in the day of the Lord, it'll be a little bit scary, right? But the prophet Joel talks about dreams and visions. He also talks about things that happens in the sky. Remember the other episode where I mentioned that there was some stuff happening in the skies and the clouds and all that stuff? Yeah, we don't know if it's related to what God's doing, but we do know this. With these dreams and visions that the Muslims are having, that God is speaking to them specifically. And obviously it's happening a lot more to them in those, like Tom said, the desperate countries, the countries that don't know Jesus, that haven't heard about Jesus. They don't even understand why Jesus died, right? They don't understand, why did Jesus die for me? I don't understand that, is what she said. And so they don't have any clue about Jesus. So Jesus is showing himself to them in droves. All the time, people are having dreams, a lot of Muslims over there. And then obviously here in the United States. So let's do our part in making sure if God calls us to speak to people about their visions and their dreams that they've been having, and they don't understand exactly what's going on, but they kind of have an idea, hey, is this Jesus? Then that's our opportunity to step in. That's our time to be ready, to be prepared with what we need to tell them about Jesus so they understand. Like in Romans, right? The road to Romans leads you to accept that everyone's a sinner, we're all sinners, and sin equals death. And the only way to pay for that is the blood of Jesus, because the wages of sin is death. But if we confess with our mouth, believe in our heart that Jesus is Lord, we will be saved. We've got to be able to give this information to people when the Lord is priming their heart to be ready to receive it, like with these Muslims with their dreams. So, anyways, be prepared for when God calls you to speak to a Muslim. Don't be afraid. Don't be confrontational. Be the way Jesus would call you to be as he leads someone to himself, as he brings them closer. And it's going to be time. It's going to be his time. So when he calls you, everything is already prepared. You just have to follow through with the closing and give him why. Give him your testimony. Give him why you believe. And then follow those steps. Let them know that Jesus died for them. Let them know that Jesus rose from the dead so that they would rise from the dead and live with him eternally. But they have to surrender their heart to him. And that's it. We just have to pass on the message. It's not even our message, it's his message. So when we pass it on to them, we're not responsible for the outcome. We're only responsible for what God has called us to do. And that is give people the gospel with love and gentleness. Read up on 1 Peter 3:15. And man, that was another great show. So thanks for listening in. Thanks for coming back. And we'll see you next time. We'll be right here at the Radio Coffee House. My name is Clint Armitage. Stay safe. Stay blessed. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Radio Coffee House Show, where we're all about Jesus, coffee, and radio. We'll see you next time.